Hello and welcome to Maker Hangar. My name is Lucas Weakley, and today we're going to be doing the beginning steps of building the Maker trainer. So first we're going to lay out the PDF plans, then cut out the foam, and then I'll show you how to cover the foam with the colored packing tape. So let's get started. Here are all the parts we're going to be using in this episode. First, we have the PDF plans. There's a link in the description where you can download these. Then we have the foam board that we're going to need. It's Adam's Ready board. You can buy it through Dollar Tree. It's $1 a sheet. We need 4 sheets of it. Then you're going to need a straight edge or a ruler, some scotch tape, an X-Acto knife or a box cutter. I prefer an X-Acto knife, a fine tip Sharpie, your colored packing tape. There's a link in the description where to get this, and a surface to cut on so you don't ruin the table you're working on. So here are the PDF plans. So the first 4 sheets of it are going to be your layouts. So these are the 4 sheets of foam and where all the pages go to make up these. So we're going to focus on the first one, which is the main fuselage and the tail section. So we're going to put these other ones aside. So this shows you where all of the pieces of paper go. So I'm going to lay this out, dry fitting it. So 1 goes here, 2 goes below it, and then they go like this. Okay, so once you see that they're pretty much all lined up, like that'll fit together after you finish it. Now we're going to start cutting. So you can push the first row up, and we're going to focus on this sheet first. So get your straight edge and your X-Acto knife, and we're going to line it up with this line. Now you want to try to cut off the line so that it's not there anymore. So right here, lining it up so that the straight edge is on the opposite side of that line. Then we're going to cut through, take this to the side, and now we're going to line up these 2 pieces. So the top line lines up with the top of the other page, and then you move the other one in. And you make sure that all the angles are lined up with it. Take your time, make sure everything's lined up. Then once you have it lined up, take your scotch tape and put it on the joint. You don't have to make it look pretty because this is all going to be cut up anyway. Put about 3 pieces. Okay, so we're going to repeat this process for the rest of it. Okay, so now that you have 1 row done, we're going to cut off the top of this. So take your straight edge, go across the top, line it up on one corner, same way that we did before, and then line it up on the other. And we're going to cut across all the sheets. And now we can set this bottom part of the sheet aside for now. Let's move on to the top and do the same thing that we did on the bottom. Okay, so now that we have the 2 halves of the sheet done, we're going to pretty much do the same thing like we did before. Now that we have that cut surface like before, we're going to lay it and line it up with the other one. So line up one edge, and line up the other. Make sure everything else is lining up. So I'm looking for these curved lines and these angled lines and moving everything so that they all line up. It's never going to be perfect, just make sure all the lines of the model are lined up. That looks pretty good. So we're going to add a piece of tape on the end, and then where this object is, so we're going to put it over that joint, and then over all the joints of the paper. So here, here, one more right here, and then one at the end. Okay, so now that we have it all taped together, we're going to cut off the edges. What we're doing is we're trimming off the extra so that this will be the same size as the foam board sheet. So it's the same process with all the other sheets, so go ahead and do those, and then we're going to lay them on the foam. Here's the pieces of foam. First step is to take off the tag. These just come off, so grab a corner and peel it up. Okay. So the way this works is you take this sheet that you just cut out and you lay it on top of the foam. Now it should all line up, which it does. And then the way that we secure it is you take the scotch tape like you had before, and you look for the parts that don't have a part that we're going to want to keep. So everything in between, that's where we're going to want to put a piece of tape. And you don't want to put tape around the parts that we want to keep, because the tape will take off the paper from the bottom of the foam. We don't want that. In between, we just want to make this secure while we're cutting it. One more over here. Okay, so you can set this one aside, and we're going to get another sheet. Now, all the other templates are different in the fact that they have 3 sides that go against the foam, but one of them won't. So you're going to look for the text that says edge of foam, and that's what you're going to line up with the foam. So this side, that's all empty space. And the same with these. So if we just lay this on top, there's the edge of foam, edge of foam, edge of foam, and then nothing over here. Now let's look at all the different lines that you're going to encounter with the PDF plans. Okay, so the first line is the dotted line. This is just a mark, so you can see this is where our cockpit's going to be. Then the next line is a phantom line. This is a long dash followed in between by 2 small dashes. This is a paper score, so you're going to cut only the top layer of the paper on the foam and leave the foam in the bottom layer untouched. Then we have the dash line, which is a score that's cutting through the top layer of the paper and the foam, leaving the bottom of the paper intact. And then all the solid lines are just a cut through. So we want to start with the mark right here. Where this corner intersects, we're going to cut all the way through to mark it on the other side, since the cockpit is going to be cut out from the other side. And we're going to do the same thing over here and over here. I'm going to do this to the other side. Okay, so you're going to want to cut out all the little things first so that the paper still stays together before we start cutting out the outlines. So we have this right here. Now some of these you can do free-handed, but I sometimes like to use a straight edge. Pop that out. Okay, so we'll do that with the other small holes. There's a couple on the wing where the servos go. There's some on the sides of the fuselage where those servos go too. Now, after you finish all those, you're gonna want to come in and see these. These are the points where the wooden dowel rods come in to hold the rubber bands on for the wing. All we're gonna do is cut out the X. Don't cut out the circle, you just need to cut out the X to guide the dowel rod. Okay, so then once you do that, then we're going to do all the paper scores. This takes a little bit of practice to do, just to make sure that you're only cutting through the top layer of paper on the foam, plus the plans. Okay. Now, when we take off the paper and we have everything cut out, see all these dots inside this area? That's where we're going to remove the paper, the first top layer of the paper. So that's where the foam is going to fold. And you can see there's a couple other areas in between these two, and then this whole top space over here is dotted. So this is going to have all of its paper removed. Also, there's a big main section on the wing as well. So I'm going to cut out all these parts, and I'll see you then. So here are all the parts that we have after we cut them out. We have the fuselage sections, the tail sections, all of the main wing pieces, and then the wing supports that go on the inside. So there are a couple other things that we have to do with taking off the paper and breaking the foam, so let's get that started. Focus on the fuselage first and look at this piece. So we did a paper score on this edge, and the paper score is so that we can just remove the paper. So that's removed, that's all we're gonna do. Don't bend this yet. Okay, the fuselage is a little bit more complicated. Now there were 5 sections to do the paper score. This main big one we can do first. So this whole top section comes off. Then we have all these little ones inside here. You can come back in with an X-Acto knife if you didn't go all the way down. And now it should just come off. Now with the scored areas, we're gonna have to break it. Breaking means just bending the foam until it breaks. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 joints that need to be broken. So we're gonna break it here and on here. Now these center pieces actually come out. They'll help the fuselage bend at a 90-degree angle. So it should just pop off. And now you're left with that open space inside here. So we're gonna do that for the rest of them. So that's pretty much everything for the fuselage. You can do a quick dry fit to see how all of these pieces are gonna fit together. So that's how our fuselage is gonna fit together, and then this folds up over the top and then these sides come in, but we'll do those after we cover. That's everything for the fuselage. Let's move on to the wings. Okay, so the wing sections, there are the two big pieces that need to be taken off. So here's this back part. This is the part that we're gonna bevel. Hopefully it'll come off in one piece. There it goes. And then we have the main big part right here. And this is what contours to the rest of the wing to give you an airfoil. Just go slow, you don't want to rip the foam. If it starts ripping from one side, come from the other. Okay, so that's pretty much everything with this part of the wing. So we'll move on to the center section. It's pretty much the same thing. Okay, now one last thing that we need to do with the wing is position it how it's gonna fit together. Now the reason why there's these angles is because the wing actually folds for transport. The wings tuck back next to the fuselage. But one important thing that we have to get right now is the alignment of the spar that goes in the middle that holds them all together. Now we want all these to be straight, so let's try to get this flat on the table. You want to put your wing sections together and line up the marks that you made from the dotted lines on the wing. And we're going to get our straight edge. We're going to run it across and make one big straight line that goes across all of it. Okay, so this top piece. Okay, so now that you have that marked, let's move on to the tail section. So everything on here is done. The rudder has nothing on it, and you don't want to remove the paper from it, so that one piece is done. Now the elevator does have a break in it. That's where the elevator control surface goes. So all you have to do is break it as you go down. Okay, we need to bevel this edge so that the elevator can move both up and down. So to do the bevel, we're going to take our straight edge and put it about 1/4 of an inch or a little bit more, 3/8 off of the edge of the foam. You can just eyeball it, it doesn't matter. Now you want your paper to be off the edge of the table so that you can come in with your X-Acto knife like this. So you're gonna rest your X-Acto knife up on the top of here and don't hit the seam. Now of course you wanna get the sharpest knife that you can get so you're not tearing at the foam. Okay, now we have a beveled edge, which the elevator now moves both up and down. And then that means that the tail section is done, and then all these center pieces, you want to keep the paper on all of them. So that's it. Now we've taken off all the paper. Next step is to start covering them. Now we're going to cover the foam with the colored packing tape. Now I have 3 colors that I'm using. You can use just one color as a base, but I kind of like having 3 just for aesthetic purposes. So here are all the pieces that we just made. Now let me show you the pieces that don't need to be covered. Now the center section for the fuselage, that doesn't need to be covered, and then all of the wing inserts, these don't need to be covered either, so I'm going to put these to the side. And we're going to focus on the fuselage first. This top part where everything's cut, that's actually the inside of the airplane. So we're covering the outside, so we're going to flip it over. Now the tape is going to waterproof the foam, and it will also protect these joints. Now you don't have to cover it, and if this is your first plane, I don't recommend it. You will be crashing if this is your first time, so build your first plane kind of sloppy, and then once you figure out how it works and how to do everything in your first plane, then make the next one look very pretty. Even if you're not going to cover the entire plane, I'd still recommend covering the bottom of the fuselage with just scotch tape. This will protect it from landing in wet grass or something like that. We have 2 different sections that we're going to do. This is the bottom of the plane, and it also wraps around to be the top of the fuselage. The fuselage is going to be white. That's my base color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from here, and we want to go inside to the bottom, and we're going to overlap in the inside, and then we're going to overlap the bottom part to go over the edge. This will make it so that you don't get anything underneath the paper when you start landing. So we're going to start over here, since this is the farthest point. you're gonna find your edge. This tape is really thin, and we're gonna wanna do an overlap with it. So I'm gonna put the first piece all the way to the edge. You wanna give it a little bit over on the table, just stick it down in place. And then stick it down. Now it sticks really well to the paper, so be sure you have it in place before you start laying it down. And you can use an X-Acto knife. And this is what I found to do. You just cut it in a section. Now, one quick thing, Ed from ExperimentalAirlines, he has a great video on how to do this. It'll be up on the screen somewhere for you to click. And he explains the process really well. So go check out that video before watching this if you want a more in-depth way of doing it. So we're gonna give it about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch overlap. And we're gonna start here, make sure it's good over on the other side, and then start overlapping it. Now once you start putting it down on the paper, it's done. You can't take it up again, or else you'll take off the paper. Okay, now we're going to come from the other side. So we're done with the white for now. We can pick this up from the table and bring it all the way to the edge because we're going to start doing this center section. So I kind of want the bottom of my plane to be blue. So I'm going to start with the blue tape. And we're going to lay down one section in the middle first and then go to the outside ones. So dead center, or about there. So we're done covering this, and the only thing that you have to do now is to trim around the edges, but we'll move on to the next pieces right now. Okay, now let's cover the tail. So let's put the rudder to the side first. The top is going to be white. Now we're going to cover both of the sides of the elevator. So let's start with the top. Now the airflow is going to come this way. So what we want to do is we want to kind of like shingle the tape so that when it overlaps, it's overlapping this way and the other piece is underneath it so that it goes with the airflow. So that means that we're going to start from the back and then move our way forward. Now sticking it on the table first allows you to move the piece around before you have to put the tape on. Ed explains this really well. Now you'll notice that we have this exposed area up in the front. Now that'll be covered by when we do the edge tape. So don't worry about that right now. We can start by cutting on the edge right now so we don't have to worry about it with the blue tape. Now this is also going to make the bottom part of the hinge for the elevator and support it. So we're going to go a little bit over. So right about there. Where the back of where you to the bevel is. Now don't trim that yet. I'll show you why in a minute. But right now we need to do the other piece. So first off, we're going to bend this way and then set it back down. So you're only going to get this overlap. Cut it before we lay down the rest. And we're going to pick this up. So now we're going to lay it all across this seam. So I found the easiest way to do this is just set it on the table and go boom to one of the edges, to the next one, and then put it all the way over. And now, when it's like that, you can start rubbing it in. Now the tape doesn't actually stick to the foam itself. It's trying to go for that little strip of paper in the middle that makes up the hinge. So you want to make sure it's really stuck down and then smooth out the rest of it. Okay, now we have the inside of the hinge taped. So we're just going to do the rest of it. Now we don't want this to overlap too much. It sticks really well to the tape, so it doesn't have to. So we're going to place the ruler on top of it, give it about 1/4 of an inch. Just eyeball it, it doesn't have to be perfect. Once it's set down, then you can just cut across. And then we're going to pin it like we did before, and just put it down. Okay, to cover the edge, we're going to start with a really long piece of tape. So place this in the middle. You can get it. And then wrap this around. We're just gonna cut this. Okay, we're gonna cut it in a couple of places to make it fold right. So we're gonna go here. Here. So we're going to start by laying down these center pieces. Okay, then we're going to follow that by the sides. And then we're just going to do these top parts. Now if you want to and you don't like that look, you can just put another piece of the blue on top and it'll only strengthen it a little bit more. So now we're going to cut this free. Okay, now that's the elevator. And the rudder's the same way, you just want to go from this surface back and then do the edges the exact same way. So cut them here and here and there. Okay, so this is one of the halves of the main wing. This is the top part where we cut on before, so we're going to flip it over, and this is the part that we're going to be covering. Now, we need to pay attention to this line. This is our fold line, so I'm going to just transfer that over. So from this point on this way, this is the top of the wing, and then this is the bottom, because this is the bottom, and then this piece folds over the top to make the wing. I'm going to make the bottom of the wing blue and the top of the wing white. So the way that we're layering the tape and the way that we want it to be shingled, we're going to start from here, do the blue first, come over to the middle edge, and then do the white the rest of the way. So let's start with the blue. And don't worry about covering up any of the servo stuff, so we'll just cut that out later. Okay, now you can notice that we've met the middle line over here, but not yet over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put a straight piece of tape across this center section. It's going to overlap this a lot, but that's how it has to be. So it goes straight here. It comes back to where that tape was before. Now, if you have a bubble like this, you can actually poke it with the X-Acto knife and then it'll come right out. So now that the bottom's covered, we're going to do the top. We're going to start from this and then come in. Last thing to do is just cut around the edges. And that's it for one of the wings. Now you're gonna do the same thing for the other two sections. Obviously this one's just gonna be the same way, and then so is this one. It's the exact same way. You're just gonna mark and go from the bottom first, then the top. It's the exact same way that we did this one. Here are all the parts that we covered in this episode. The first thing to cover and talk about is the tail. Now you can see I covered the rudder, and I also added a couple other strips of tape to add stripes to it. Now this is completely optional, but it sets your plane apart from everyone else. Now I did the same thing with the elevator, just put a strip of black on the side, and then I wrapped it around the control surfaces like we did before. So that's the elevator and the tail. These are pretty much the only things that you can put stripes on right now because they're done. Now the wing you can put stripes on, but that'll have to be later. For the fuselage, I covered everything and then I trimmed around the edges, the outlines. There are 3 holes on the fuselage that you're going to have to worry about. Now we covered over everything so that you're going to want to cut out some of them. You only want to cut out the one that's on the left. This is for the elevator servo, and then the other one is for the rudder servo. Now the rudder we're going to install as a mod later on as you progress. And so you don't cut this one out, you just leave the tape over it and it'll keep it from getting anything inside that hole. And then of course you cut out the hole for the servo wires to go through for the wing. Now moving on to the wing, you can see we covered the wing with 2 colors, and then we're going to wrap it around and it'll make a bottom and the top colors different. We also cut out the servo holes. We covered over these and then we just cut them out. Now, one other thing that I did was to bevel this edge. So that little strip of paper that we took off before, that needs to be beveled. Now the way I recommend to do this is with a sanding block. So take about 100 grit sandpaper. If you go any more, if it's any rougher, it'll start tearing at the foam. So, and if it's any less, it'll take too long. So 100 grit sandpaper or about there, hot glue it to a block and wrap the excess around the edges. And this gives you a nice flat surface for you to sand on it. And you just want to put this on the edge of a table and then just sand back and forth. And make sure that it's a angle coming from where the paper is all the way to the end of the paper on the tip. So it's kind of like a knife edge. This lines up with the foam on the top to make a transition between the wing to the aileron surface. So this is really important. Now you're going to do this to both the wings and also to the center wing section right there. That's it for this episode. Next time I'm going to show you how to build the plane and get it ready for electronics to be installed. So I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.